Director in the MII. I warmly welcome everybody to this session this evening. As you can see, we have a wonderful attendance and also a list of apologies from people who couldn't come. This is a great opportunity to meet, share experience, and hopefully assist those who want to set up community mediation in their area. Because we have a vast amount of experience on the screen here in front of us, and please ask the question to anybody that's here. The one thing about people in community mediation is they are very sharing of their experiences and their knowledge. So don't be afraid to ask a question. A particular word of thanks to Alison, who is back in the head office in the MII. And Alison, thankfully, lent her assistance this evening to us with her IT knowledge and the working of Zoom, because I'm not great on that. So thank you very much, Alison, for that. I have been constantly asked, how do we start a community mediation project over the last year and a half? What would it look like? How is it funded and supported? And hopefully we can explore some of those questions tonight. And I know among the audience we have here, there are some that are at the moment researching how do we do a community media, how do we start a community mediation project? And they're faced with all these questions. So hopefully this will be the first of a few webinars or sessions that we can have as a group to support those that are starting it and hopefully give them some roadmap or guidelines along the way to share our experiences. Okay, what's it going to look like? So what we're going to do from the very start is we're going to run through with Jeffrey Corrie. I'll introduce Jeffrey in a second. Community mediation, how it has evolved, and how is it looking like in Ireland? Where did it come from and where are we going? In the second part of it, we have John Mulligan, and John is going to look at the challenges and obstacles to community mediation in Ireland. Then we're going to go to somebody that is in the process of starting a community mediation project and asking the question, how do I go about it? What do I do? What steps do I take? And that's Ronan O'Brien. And we'll leave our questions till after, if that's okay. And I would ask you to put your questions in the chat so Alison can collate them and we can present them after, if that's okay. Is everybody okay with that? I would ask you, if you can, please, to mute your audio so that it wouldn't be coming across some of our speakers. So thank you, everybody. So first up, we have Jeffrey Corrie. I just want to introduce Jeffrey, and to introduce Jeffrey, it would probably take me 2 days, along with John Mulligan, with their experience. So Jeffrey has been an independent dialogue facilitator, a mediator and trainer, and specialist in conflict resolution for over 30 years. He's one of the founding members of Glen Cree back in 1980, in the 80s, facilitating over 50 political dialogue workshops at Glen Cree after the ceasefire in 1994. That's contributed handsomely to the Good Friday Agreement. He has been a family mediator in the mediation service for over 20 years. He has been the chairman of the MII from 1999 to 2002, founder of the Tala Community Mediation, awarded the MII Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023, written many books, published numerous papers around conflict resolution. And that's only the half of it. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for giving of your time. So I'm going to hand over to you first of all.
Thank you very much. And that's a wonderful introduction you've given me. And what I'd like to do is to give you a little bit of the story of how community mediation arrived in Ireland, which is quite close or similar to my own role in doing that. So I'm going to show you, I'll have some slides in the background to show you some of the issues and the themes that we're dealing with. So I got interested in, let me just get this thing up here. Sorry, we're coming up now. Okay, right. Very good. So I got involved. Is that yeah? I got involved towards the end of the 80s when I was tried to find a way of, because I was involved in youth work. And so in those days, you went to America. You mightn't be going to America these days for all the news and information. So it very much grew community mediation out of three traditions out there. The first was that many people in the 60s and early 70s had been in the protest movement against the Vietnam War. And so they were building their own philosophy and approach in peacemaking. And therefore you had a whole generation committed to seeing how could we get win-win solutions as opposed to adversarial solutions. So many of the people who came into community mediation came out of the anti-Vietnam War. The second big movement or influence was trying to find less expensive ways of resolving legal disputes. You probably know in the States, it's very costly, and some of those big cases go up to $1 million quite quickly. So it was an attempt to enable people to find something other than going to court. And that became known as ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. And the third big factor was people were wanting to see how do you empower local people to take over and resolve disputes. And the theme of tackling issues at source becomes a big flag almost that we need to create more efforts locally to find ways of doing that. So the other big factor was racial discrimination that was going on in the States. And the 1964 Civil Rights Act provided some funding towards supporting a community mediation schemes. And it was a top-down act, but yet there was an attempt to resolve racial issues particularly by President Lyndon Johnson. He had a big problem getting it through the courts, but it did actually, or through the Congress. So the Americans are saying that there were two significant types of schemes that got going. One is described as neighborhood justice centers, and they were linked a lot to traditional Navajo tribes and Indian communities, where the whole notion of a circle, bringing people around a circle of elders, can we not do that in today's world of a circle approach, and go for restorative approaches? So those, I don't know whether there are many of those original justice centers still around or not. The bigger shift was the community-based mediation schemes, and some of those are now part of the NACM, the National Association for Conflict Management. So they have quite a good website to go on if you want to learn more about the community mediation schemes. So this was one of the books that was published. You can see it was published quite 1993. That's 30 years ago, and describing it as popular justice. It's not a term that we've used much since then, but of course there's populism in the political movement, but some of the early schemes in community mediation were written up in that book. So for those of you who want to do a bit more research, that's available. So how do I do this to get the next one? So I'm going back rather than going forward. In those days, the civil rights movement, there was a huge amount of polarization. In the Vietnam War, there was a huge polarization at a political level. And of course, in America right today, there is renewed polarization as the elections come on. So in terms of local community issues, a polarization can arise. So I put down on the left-hand side some of the types of things, the avoidance. People simply avoid working on a dispute to your neighbor, ignoring people. Then we're moving into more verbal stuff and hate crime, which is emerging. Loud parties going on, or rubbish being thrown in your doorway. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see some more types of issues that have broken, have come out, that your doors get broken, or windows or cars get broken, as something escalates out of hand and people get angry, or there's mental illness issues from local people, or other forms of antisocial behavior. So the whole goal of community mediation as they evolved was, how do we transform those relationships from polarization into enabling people to sit down and talk to each other. And so that's what was the next big step of how do we do that. So this is a useful assumption to have as to what we are trying to do, that the best place to start addressing conflict, interpersonal disputes, is to work towards healing, is in fact at the local level. If only we could do much more and intervene earlier at local level, through family, through when there's neighbor disputes, when there's working place disputes, and wider in a collective level. So the belief is that I've always worked in is, sometimes you wonder, are we actually achieving anything? But if you believe that you build community by resolving one dispute, one conflict each time, that each of those are steps towards building community at the local level. And if we don't tackle it, then they get moving on. I've just recently become chairman of our residents association, and we've had to deal with barking dogs, or dogs that bite, and particularly those dangerous dogs. And we've had to deal with someone who is very mentally ill down the road. And at what point does he cross the line into antisocial behavior, and it becomes a criminal matter? Or how do we handle it, maybe with the help of the community Garda or whatever? So let's go on to see how it went from there. Well, we said about transforming the conflict at the bottom of the right-hand corner. The terminology, which the concept is that what we can do is to humanize the relationship. That it is a relational piece of work. Yes, that we have to work with the substantive issues and the content issues, but the power of community mediation is enabling people on each side to sit down and hear each other's story. What's the emotional, what's the anger, and helping us to hear and acknowledge each other's situation. And through that, we build the relationship, and we humanize each other as we go along in that process. So when I went to the States, the particular group were called the community boards. And I just found this slide today. I think it's very helpful, because what I think the big difficulties of community mediation is, how do you get cases? Because we're all set up and we're all ready to go, but it's often quite hard to, despite all what we're seeing in local, how do people hear about mediation? So this notion of having outreach workers, I think, is something we need to look at. How do we encourage some of our volunteer mediators to actually go out and connect with local organizations, local groups, local residents associations, so that they know and understand what mediation is about. There's a big confusion out there about mediation. Is it conciliation? Is it or is it counseling? Or is it meditation? Or is it medication? So the term mediation is sometimes quite difficult to talk. The second big element there is that don't expect people to come straight in to your office or to your community center with their case. You need to go and have pre-mediations with people so as to build their confidence, to enable them to put it into words and to identify the issues and to frame the issues. Because the more we can do in pre-mediation, it will make the actual mediation much more effective. And the third big thing that community mediation brought in is it's best not to do, since volunteers mediation since mediators, community mediations are volunteers, then we're not up into thousands of pounds or even hundreds of pounds, but it's free time. And so the whole notion of co-mediation becomes terribly important, that we can, and that allows a male-female balance, and gender issues are becoming much more important in our work. And so having co-mediators balanced gender-wise is very good. Now, if you want a full list of the hallmarks of community mediation, you'll find these on the NACM website. That's the National Association for Community Mediation. I'm not going to go through all of those, but I've summarized them here for yourselves, of the values and principles that have come to us out of the community mediation movement, that were voluntary, not for profit, that this was written many years ago, before EDI came in, equality, diversity, and inclusion. Those are values that we support. But I suppose the real thrust of the community mediation work is, as I said a few minutes ago, is that people volunteer. They volunteer their time. And we've been very lucky in our situation that people who have just come through their accreditation, that they are wanting experience. And so we can rely on or call on giving people or enabling people to have their first experience, and to have one experienced co-mediator alongside a new co-mediator. Number 4, that the public can directly access the service by phone, email, or whatever. So that's a bit about your outreach work again, that people know you and know where to get you or know how to contact you. All local societal conflicts are addressed. Now that's a lovely value, a lovely goal, a lovely aspiration. Are we really up to being able to look at all societal conflicts, not just interpersonal disputes, but also collective community disputes? And number 6, I emphasized this earlier, that tackling issues at source is a real headline for our work about how to intervene much more earlier before situations escalate. And the ADR number 7, providing a route. Now, how did I get involved? Well, I was very fortunate that we found this guy called Raymond Schoenholz in San Francisco, and he had a sabbatical from being director of community boards, and he only had about 3 weeks to go, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll come to Ireland." And he came to Ireland for 1 week in 1986, and we had him 3 days in Dublin and 3 days in Northern Ireland. And that's when I caught the vision of what community mediation was about. And wonderfully, because he had loads of contacts with funders in the States, he got 3 grants from the Public Welfare Foundation to bring 3 of us from Ireland over to San Francisco. We were also exploring other avenues, and the Mennonite Conciliation Service, Ron Crable, had developed a very good mediation process, and we borrowed that. And as we developed those contacts, they enabled Barry Hart to come over to Ireland to spend 6 months, both north and south, to train us in. So that's how we got the whole thing getting off the ground. So there's a picture of, there's a picture of the three of us, a very youthful Jeffrey Curry in the middle, and we had Sister Christina O'Neill of Pax Christi. She had discovered mediation through the Mennonite service, and teamed up with me as a result of Ray Schonhold's visit here. And because we sent him up north, it was Joan Broder who was involved at that time in Extern, which is an ex-prisoners organization. So that he picked the three of us, or rather the other way around, he got 2 grants for us to go. And we said, well, we have, all 3 of us have to go. So luckily, Sister Christina, her religious order, didn't they have a beautiful convent in San Francisco? So I got the priest's room, and the other 2 got nuns' rooms. And that made it financially possible for all 3 of us to go. It was a marvelous experience, and we got a whole week of training in how to set up a scheme, and then a week of training in the actual process itself. And unfortunately, Ray died quite in 2012, but his passion was just amazing, and introducing us and really believing in people like us. So I basically brought the community mediation good news back from San Francisco to Ireland. But we did have an immediate challenge of how do we work the process they'd given us. However, this picture just shows I happen to be able to get to a part of my learning was always to go to conferences in England and these American conferences each year. And one was held in Nevada. So I was able to pop into the San Francisco office and to thank community boards for the wonderful contribution that they've made to us in Ireland in training the 3 of us. This is Ray's wife, Anne, and they had actually come to Ireland again. Gail, we met at that time, and she developed a youth program called the Community Mediator Program. And Darlene is still the director there of community boards. So we were taught a 6-stage process, and I won't go into all the detail there. But and you see, it was a board. That's why they were called community boards. So they because San Francisco is very multiracial. So they had a Chinese person or a Vietnamese person, an American person, a black person, and somebody else. So we all thought that was a bit top heavy, but you never know. It just shows you. And because it turns it into a board, and they were sitting behind the table. For us, it was a bit too structured, and so we wanted a much more informal approach. But what we loved was the stages of hearing the story and then enabling each other to hear each other and to validate the emotion. So we brought those ideas, but Christina had been trained by Ron Crable in London, and they had a 4-stage process: storytelling, problem solving, and agreement. And we liked that as well. So we amalgamated the 2, and what did we come up with? But the 5 stages, and it has since been called by people the diamond model, and adding in the pre-mediation phases. So that's we really wanted to hold on to the storytelling approach that we were taught in the States, and we added in the framing the issues. Okay, so that's the American experience. Over in the UK, we're talking now about the 1990s. There were very significant local projects getting off the ground, some influenced by the Americans. In London, there was this quite strong group called the Newham Project, partly influenced by Tavistock. Up in Leeds, I'm not sure where their model came from, but again, they were a leading group. Bristol was great both in community mediation and family mediation. The Bristol group influenced the family mediation service model. And then there was another crowd called Conflict Management Plus. So I met all of these groups at the annual conference. I don't think Mediation UK is still going, but that was significant to be able to share our experience with them and to get experience from them. So that's all very much about competence building. So how did we develop it in Ireland? Well, I tried first of all to see if we could do it in Dublin City, and I approached the Quakers. But you see, Quakers their decision making is by consensus. So something like 3 months later, I did finally get a letter back saying no, they weren't interested in supporting a community mediation scheme. But I mean, they have been involved in community mediation in other places. So where did I happened to get to know some people in Tala, because I thought it'd be good to go to a suburban area. And there I found, let's see if I got the next slide. There I found Councillor John O'Connor, Fianna Fáil, who's still going strong. And we managed to, there was a Sister Maria Flynn, I can't remember which order she's from, and Elizabeth Cleary was one of the first to come on board in a kind of employment role. In the background, you can see Porrick, who's still around. I think some of you have met him. So it was through the community information service that John O'Connor was involved in that we got a leg in to start the Tala Community Service, the Tala Community Mediation Service. We were also in touch with the Travellers, and I think this Traveller scheme is still going. If I can remember rightly, Collins. I think. Well, I see you nodding your head, Tony, and we had somebody there recently, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Out in Mounttown, independently of all the various movements, there was a group of people who were tried in a kind of a working class housing estate, and they subsequently moved to another part of the city or to the county. Cork City did start, they did try, and but through financials, they closed down. And that's one of the big problems for community mediation schemes. How do you get finance? Where will the money come from to keep you going? And will you get the support of the local authority, or who else can you get support from to keep things going? Now, around that time, there was the social welfare department encouraged local community law centres, and money and two communities got hold of that money in the north side, meaning Coolock, Artane area, and in Ballymun. And out of that came two community law centres, which are to this day still going strong. And it was through Frank Murphy in Ballymun and the solicitor they were both solicitors. They were very interested in community mediation, and they supported a joint training scheme, which I did for them. And out of that came the North Side Community Mediation and the Ballymun Mediation, which are still going. Now, around the same time then, because of Joan Broder coming back from being with us out in San Francisco, she supported a group to start, and out of that came Northern Ireland Mediation, and they're still going quite strong. It was Brendan McAllister who was the first full-timer, and we're going to be meeting them up when we go up to the Belfast conference in October. And
5 minutes, Jeffrey. 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes. Okay, so I'll rush through here. So how did we get the MII on board? Well, obviously I was a bit in that and trying to, but it was wonderful that at the conference in 2014 they recognized many of the community mediation schemes. Horrick here in Tala, Melda in Ballymun, Valerie in Northside, and Mary Rafferty up in Clonus, and that gave them all. Getting a plaque is wonderful and acknowledgement and recognition. So maybe in 2024, Tony will have to honor a few more community mediation schemes. I've shown you that picture of how we got off the ground in Tala, and we had this 25 years celebration. Sorry, 25 years celebration there about a year or two ago after COVID. The Tala was also influential in that we got the first restorative scheme going, and we got a grant from the Roundtree Trust to be able to do that. And Keeley, what's his first name? I can't remember his first name. He was our first full-timer in community mediation, and then he went on to do the restorative scheme, and I gather he's just retired there recently. Here's Councillor John O'Connor, who is still around and still supporting schemes. So that's another factor, that you need political support at local councillor level. And I should say that this guy was in the probation service, and he was very enthused by one of the Mennonites I got over to Dublin to talk about the restorative scheme. And he came forward with this pre-sentence scheme in Tala. So in Ballymun, they were fortunate in getting someone like Sonia, and she was there, stability for so many years, along with others, to get the scheme off the ground. So it wasn't just community mediation. She developed peer mediation schemes in the local schools, some effort to create the family dispute resolution, but the trouble is that it has to be coincide with or parallel to the family mediation service, and some effort was made to get restorative justice going. So, as I say, Ballymun celebrated their service 21 years ago last year, and I had the fortune of, well, they asked me to speak about the mediation service. Here is Frank Murphy, the solicitor who was around, and his belief in mediation got us off the ground at that stage. Claire is today the organizer. So I still run some training for them there. That's our most recent group of mediation skills training, of mainly community-based people. He's in Georgia working on community development, and others are in different types of community-based schemes. Over in Northside then, look at this wonderful building. The OPW put a lot of money into building this huge, big premises as a community centre. And the Northside Community Law Centre is over here on the left-hand side, I think on the first floor. And so ordinary people could come in with an inquiry. They can go to here, or they can go to Community Place here, or HSE here, or all the other community type, both public and private. And so that's a great resource for enabling people to come to the mediation desk to see whether we can resolve it there. Valerie Corcoran was the first community mediation manager there and did tremendous work over a period of 10 years or more, and I was involved with her in getting things going and the mediation there. And we tried out one of our first sharing and learning groups there in Northside. So here's a picture of some of the volunteer mediators, and they've all used their community mediation skills. It's a trade-off. They use the community mediation skills in their professional work, and in turn, they use their professional skills in community mediation. And so it's just been wonderful to have these pioneering people who really believe and love the values and can see the trade-off for themselves professionally and in other ways. I'm coming now to the end here. If I can get this thing to so this is just an example of, these were people who did our course many years ago. He was got involved with the deaf relief service and wanted the community skills. She was involved in the Ballymun scheme, actually. Mary Lou O'Kennedy, you'll probably know from other, she's now a full-time professional in her own way. He had just retired as a vice principal of a primary school, and I can't remember now where she was involved, but it shows you how community mediation pulls people from different professions. Now, how do you keep your community mediation scheme funded? So in Northside, well, they had the office already, but through the community enterprise scheme, they were able to employ, or community employment scheme, sorry, they were able to employ an extra person in admin and so on. But of course, you do have to rely on private givings and other types of sales. And that's in 2010. 5,500 was a lot of money, even 10 years ago. So I was involved then in bringing the good news about community mediation to other areas. In Mayo, here were a group of people involved in community employment schemes and the community information centers. And they really found it very helpful to have this extra string in their bow of mediation skills. And then some of them volunteered to be local mediators. I haven't been in touch with them recently, so I don't know whether the skill is still going. But you can see that you have the Garda here, you have the mayor here, and you have the head of the community information services. Now, here is mediation border counties. We started off in Cavan, and it's now based in Clones. But they were lucky to get the EU border funding to get it going. And I've been involved through Glencree in getting another a Peace Plus scheme supported there. An application has been made. So Mary Rafferty, you probably know, she's kept it going. But here it's a family resource center which houses the community mediation scheme, and that's a very good house or to be an agency to be associated with. And up there in the border area, it's family mediation. You can see is being supplied, and community mediation. But you see, they also are working on peace and reconciliation issues, and very interesting farming issues there at the bottom. So those are all types of issues that we have to work with. In the Dublin area, the court service was interested in making more structural relationship between mediation services and cases going through the courts. And so there is, if you come into the circuit court, the judge and some of the solicitors encourage people to take their case to the community mediation. So on a Friday, I understand each of the Dublin mediation services took a room or by a rota. I'm not sure how successful it is. Maybe John Mulligan can tell us a bit more, but it is an idea for to hook up with circuit and district courts locally, because judges could and probably want to refer many of their cases into community mediation. Okay, so I better just I'd stop there then and
okay, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, thank you so much. That was brilliant presentation, very enlightening, and there's so much there for everybody to think about. because of your experience, and you put your finger on so much that is relevant to everybody here, for people starting off and people that are there around the funding channels, and how do you get it out in community, and how it works, and different topics. So look, there's a lot for everybody. I would ask anybody that has any questions, could you put it into the chat box, please? And so that we can put it to Jeffrey afterwards, maybe to clarify any issue or to see any other further information that you require. And Jeffrey, thank you so much for that. That was really well done. Okay, so just looking at the names here of people that have registered, Alison has reminded me, along with a lot of the more established people that are involved in community mediation, we've quite a few in the audience this evening that are new members, that are first time coming along to something. So you're especially welcome, and I hope you can stick in there and contribute as we go along and ask any questions that you want, because to have the likes of Jeffrey and John and other people here, we might as well pick their brains while we have them. So make sure to ask your questions in the chat box, and Alison is going to collate those questions, and we're going to put it to those people afterwards, or anything else. So no, just moving on a little bit. I'm going to introduce John Mulligan. John, again, has been a central pillar to community mediation for many, many years. John has been involved in the profession of mediation his whole adult life. He is a director of Breakthrough Consultancy. He specializes in conflict coaching, mediation, dialogue facilitation, training, leadership team, and organization development. John has a real passion for community mediation, and his commitment to Dublin community mediation has been universally acknowledged. John has been a great support for community mediation for many years, and when he was on the MII board, with the responsibility of supporting those in community mediation, he put enormous energy into that role and really worked hard with it. He continues to give that support and perspective to everybody. Now, John is going to talk about outlining the challenges facing community mediation and suggest how we can overcome some of those obstacles surrounding community mediation. So, John, you're very welcome, and thanks so much for coming along.
Thanks, Tony. I suppose the kind of first thing that I would say is that I have been around community mediation for quite a while. I worked with CLM for a while in Coolock, and then in Wicklow when they set up the process there. And then more or less for the last 10 or 11 years, I've been involved in Dublin community mediation. But as well as that, I've been involved with Jeffrey in Glencree, and certainly that was an enlightening experience working on the political program there with him. And have also done some work in various different countries, in South Africa particularly, but also in the US and England and elsewhere. So I draw from a wide range beyond mediation of conflict resolution processes and peace processes and so on in my own personal interest. So what I've got to say here today is partly as a result of my role as community liaison officer when I was in MII communication, partly from my experience in Dublin community mediation, and partly because I've got my own ideas about community mediation, which I've begged, borrowed, and stolen from loads of different people, and not the least of whom is Jeffrey. But I also noticed that there's quite a few other people around here from different mediation organizations that I hope they'll chip in as well. Now, one of the things that it said on the initial blurb was that I would talk a bit about the state of community mediation today in Ireland, and I'm way behind in terms of my understanding of that. So let's see if I can share with you, first of all, a survey that we did when I was in the liaison role with MII back in 2017. I had a read through it today and I thought, oh, I wonder how much has changed with this. But I bring it up because it was a report to the annual conference in 2017. So let me see if I can share this. Okay. So this was, can people see this?
Yes, John.
You can, okay, great. So the reason for doing this is that we did a small survey of the variety of different people doing community mediation around the country at the time. And we had a number of meetings over in Maynooth at the Kennedy Centre there, who kindly facilitated us over a period of time. And we presented it at the annual conference. And these are some of the groups that we talked to in initial interviews to try and get a sense of what was going on. And broadly, some of the things that were going on then, there were relatively low numbers of cases coming directly from the community. And self-referral, of course, was one of the ideas that would happen in some of the American cases that Jeffrey has spoken about. A major number of the cases at the time were family mediation, almost to the point where people were thinking, well, is community mediation family mediation really? Very small number of cases referred from the courts, and community law mediation, Ballymun and ourselves in DCM regularly turned up at the courts to get cases referred to us, but the numbers were very small. Numerous volunteers, mediators weren't getting sufficient cases, and lots of trained mediators came to DCM, and I suspect the same to CLM and to Ballymun, because they wanted experience. And this was one of the things that drew people in, and also, of course, the sharing and learning and additional training opportunities that they got there. But the cases were simply not enough for all the volunteers we were getting. And that is the same today to a great extent. The use of community mediation, approximately 50 to 60 cases at the time per year were going on around the three Dublin centres. And the various sharing and learning support was provided by all of those services for the mediators. Some of the strengths that we identified at the time: skilled volunteers, mediators, committed boards, sharing and learning practice support, which was quite robust and drawing in people, even though the cases might not have been there. Fairly basic, reasonable facilities, but some better than others. And Jeffrey's photograph of Coolock was a good example there of the CLM. And indeed, the facilities they had in Wicklow were quite good as well, albeit from a partner organisation. Some funding support. We were getting some funding support from South Dublin County Council. CLM were probably doing better in the sense that they were getting support from the Law Society and from the Bar Council, among other places. And also Ballymun was getting a certain amount of support from those sources as well. And because they were linked to legal services that they were providing, that probably helped with both their referral services and indeed the funding that they got to do other activities besides mediation, which they were running, including educational services and so on, particularly legal education of one kind or another. You can see today that the amounts of money, for example, in community mediation, let's say in DCM, we probably have a turnover of about 10,000 a year. Ballymun probably have about, I don't know, the last I looked at their accounts was about 90 or 100,000, whereas up near $1 million for CLM. Now, obviously, they're not using all of that for mediation, but it shows you the kind of organization that can be there to provide excellent support for a community mediation service, which they all run, in addition to the many other services that they provide. Okay, lots of information, dissemination, promotion of community mediation, and so on. High demand for family mediation, Cavan, Waterford, and of course now Clonus, had a low charge for family mediation. That was how they funded their services, but obviously related to the Family Resource Centre there as well. Low demand directly from the community themselves. Higher demands were linked where there was training offering, and I think Jeffrey's work in both Tala and in Ballymun probably helped with that, where the idea was train local people to do the mediation. In Northern Ireland, because of the peace process and because of the Troubles, mediation was much better funded through the various peace processes referred to by Jeffrey and Brendan McAllister's work, and indeed others around the southern border counties that I was involved in, provided some of the funding, such as Jeffrey has described. Port ran one, Cork ran a service which closed down because they well, first of all, was challenging to run the service without financial supports. But I spoke to oh dear, her name has gone out of my head this morning. But and she has never gone back since. And partly of that is because the impact, she says, of the mediation bill. It alienated her completely from the legal direction that mediation was going. And she was probably one of the most powerful promoters, both in CLM and elsewhere. So CLM, of course, were at that time able to support mediation through many of the other resources. Okay, so we did a bit of a survey, and this was presented. We were a group, and we were trying to review the challenges of the centre facing the sector and create an agenda for supporting and promoting community mediation. And remember now, this is back in 2017. And there we hope to kind of clarify the needs of MII members operating in the community sector and identify stakeholders and MII that could better meet the needs of mediators and ADR in the community. Okay, so some of the initial findings: a greater need to understand the sector providers. They were such diverse, some trying to get going, some closing down, some being very successful, particularly the ones related to law centres, others who had chosen not to link into legal services like DCM, went a different path and did so with very limited amounts of funding and so on. The lack of state commitment to the community mediation. And certainly at the time when the discussions were taking place, and indeed the year since, the discussions were taking place about the registration council, it was agreed by all that community mediation should be one of the 5 sectors represented on the working party group. And so they were, but they were working together with organizations such as MII, the Bar Council, the Law Society, CRB, who all had very significant resources behind them. And you can imagine the challenges of representing community sector adequately in the context of such powerful bodies as that. And well, it continues, let's say, for the moment. Trying to identify who are your community and what kind of problems you're trying to solve in the community and how you relate to those was certainly a big challenge all around, given the low numbers and the low uptake of community mediation directly from the community. How would you go about that? the need for further research in the sector, and we tried to get some research going about the ROI, or return on investment of the sectors, and MII had hoped to fund this, but in the end didn't. So that research didn't get done, even though we had worked with Dublin UCD to do that. We put together the proposal and expand our participation among of the people working in this area collaboratively. We were trying to bring together people right across the country in the community sector. However, I left the role after 3 years, and not a huge amount of progress, but a lot of extremely interesting discussion and connections. We did an online survey with the help of MII and Alison's good help. She will remember a lot of this. There was about 40 mediators from all around the country responded to it, and we asked a range of questions. How do you provide community mediation? And you can see there the answer to that question was through community mediation services. Some through private practice, some through their service offering in other contexts. For example, Dublin City Council had their own mediators who were offering mediation, particularly in the housing and in the with housing tenants and so on. And a number of them turned up to these meetings. Also, for the most part, you can see 60–70% of those involved in it were unpaid. And most of them only did occasional work. There weren't very many cases. How did you publicize your services? Again, mostly through a voluntary organization, but people were beginning to do media, social media, some radio, and promotional talks to agencies and community groups. How's your service funded? Again, I've spoken a little bit about that, but most of it was through voluntary contributions. DCM, for example, got a small fund, a small grant from the Dublin, South Dublin County Council, which we still get, but most of the rest of the funding was made up of fees paid by the volunteers to become members. With some exception to that in DCM's case, a change in recent years where we got involved with TROR in a particular project called Let's Work It Out, which was supporting parents who parented together but didn't live together. I won't go into the details of that right now, but that provided a spike in our funding. However, we're back to normal again until we get that project going again, which we would hope to. How long has the service been in operation? Greater than 5 years. Again, we were looking at the community mediation centres, and Jeffrey has mentioned a few that started up around the country, and some that I've mentioned some that closed. How many cases per year? Again, you can see very few people had 20 or more. Most people had less than 5 cases a year. And some of those mediators might be working in CLM in Ballymun and in DCM as members. But still a very small number of cases. And we're talking here about community mediation cases. Of course, we're not talking about people working in FMS. Some of them, obviously, as I said before, were paid. What types of cases or groups have you mediated in the past? Family disputes, parenting, and neighbourhood disputes were the major ones through the community mediation, although there were some doing workplace disputes, particularly for community and voluntary organisations, and some doing school-based as well. Kind of broader community conflicts, multi-party community conflicts, there weren't many. What are the greatest challenges for a community mediator? This is back in 2017. Has it changed much? Perhaps we can answer that. For some reason, though, you're not getting the full picture there. So let me see if I can. Okay, so I need to go back on that. I'm trying to get the. Okay, so getting cases and training were the major ones, the major obstacles. Sorry about that. I can't get the color references there. Training people had completed mostly back then. It was the basic 60 hours, but quite a few had completed the 32, or as it was then, family mediation training. Other people had done restorative practice, and some had done relevant master's qualifications. Some had done elder mediation. And I suppose the big change there now would be the numbers of people who have trained in conflict coaching. Okay. So, okay, that gives you a rough idea of what it was like back then. And the reason I've showed it now is that I'm not sure that there has been a huge amount of changes, but I would suggest to Tony and recommend that a survey such as that is done again. It was an easy thing to do. It was one of those, was it monkey surveys or whatever Alison would be able to tell us there. But it seems like a fairly simple survey that would be useful to collect some data about what's going on in community mediation today and update some of that information. And that might give us a basis for a more informed assessment about what's going on and what's needed. We tried to revision community mediation, and these were some of the kinds of things that we came up with, but I won't go into that right now. What I would like to do, maybe what would it take back then? A shared vision. I think there was lots of people who had different ideas about what community mediation was. There was also people who had ideas that mediation wasn't the only form of alternative dispute resolution. So the work of Glen Cree, the work of restorative justice, the work of nonviolent communication, the work of in the prisons of AVP and so on, that there's a range of supports, and including conflict coaching, that could be used. And indeed, we broadened out in DCM the range of service offerings that we were offering parents who parent together but don't live together. And we had a significant amount of success doing that. So we need resources. I mean, again and again and again, that comes up. That hasn't changed. We need national support for some kind of coordination. We went so far in that group as to develop a role description for a national development officer for community mediation sector. And we believe that it would be a very helpful thing to have that funded centrally or by a philanthropic organization in order to bring some kind of cohesion in the center and to help coalesce the needs and the efforts and the energy of the center. And that's more needed now than ever, given that community mediation is going to continue having a role in the setting up of the and the commencing of the registration council and codes of ethics and so on, which potentially could alienate community mediators, as indeed it did with Tricia Hayes, who was the person I was trying to remember there earlier. Okay, I won't go into that. So what I wanted to do, oops, I've lost my, oh, sorry. Okay, I'm going to stop that share. I'm looking for a different, I had a number of questions there that I wanted to pose directly in relation to sorry, just a moment. Directly in relation to the setting up of a community mediation. So apologies for my mixed
Take your
up
time, John. Take your
in
time.
the slides here.
If anybody has any questions for John, just put it in the chat and we'll come back to it afterwards if that's possible.
Yeah. Sorry, I seem to have misplaced.
John, do you want to leave it and we'll come back to you? Take your time.
Yeah, just a moment now. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, I found it.
Thanks, John. So we have 20 minutes left till 8 o'clock. So
Right. I won't be very long with this because it's a series of questions, and some of them may not be entirely appropriate for startups, but certainly questions that will crop up in time. Let's see if I can. Okay, can people see that?
yes, perfect, John.
Okay, so that was by way of highlighting what I was just sorry, my okay. Right, I picked the wrong okay, so back to the questions. I think some of the key questions, and here I'm giving my personal views, rather than let's say the views of Dublin Community Mediation. I think Jeffrey talked a little bit about how he got started and so on. And I think it often gets started by one or two people who have an interest and a commitment to something, and start off small and begin to identify a few cases that they might be able to take on with a small group of mediators and build up from there. Another way of approaching it would be to take a more strategic approach, to ask yourself, what problems are you trying to address in the community? And the reason why I think this is such an important question is to identify who are your community and what is it that they need. We talked some time back to the head of the FMS who came out and talked to us about the work that we were doing. And she said, I think you're a more mediator-facing organization than a client-facing organization. And that was a strong challenge to us. She saw us as meeting the needs of people who wanted to develop their skills as mediators much more strongly than she saw us as meeting the needs of a particular target group. So I think start off by asking you, who are you serving? What is it that they need? How do you know that they need that? What's the extent of it? What's the scale, the scope of that need? And then begin to ask the question, what kind of a service are you offering? Are you offering family mediation? Are you offering neighborhood mediation? Are you offering conflict coaching to address that need? But be very clear that being clear about what the need is and who your target group are is a really important question to get clear. Starting out with the idea of we're mediators, and look for something that needs mediation without having a clear idea in your head, maybe might not be the most economic or effective approach. So what do they need? If you're giving a free service, and it has become clear over the course of some of the stories that I related to there, that community mediation is not well funded. And some mediation services are having to charge, may have to charge. So if you're giving a free service, you ask a very different kind of question to if you're offering a paid community service. And indeed, a great deal of community mediation services in the US now are paid for, and they're run by legal people as well. So the type of person that you're aiming at, if you're aiming for the more economically marginalized or deprived communities and so on, which is certainly where DCM and I think Ballymun and CLM have been focused. The assumption there is that it's free, but it does need to be funded, and you'll have to ask yourself, if you're not getting funded, how will you be able to deliver that service? And particularly in our case in DCM, how can you provide the management and administration costs, the costs of telephones, the costs of a venue to do the mediation, etc., etc. There are costs involved in it, albeit that you can keep them pretty low. If you're going to scale up your operations, which most community mediation want to do, then it does take more of a business approach to how you're going to do it. So how will it be funded? I would say really critical. And as we are finding out, it's very easy to get some, what I would call program funding, such as we did with the Let's Work It Out program from our collaboration with Rethink Ireland, and particularly with TROR, who helped to kickstart that whole process for us and to maintain it for a while. But getting core funding, yearly funding for core services of employment of staff is very, very challenging. And while we have 40 odd mediators to deliver the services, it's a huge job, as we found out, to provide the backup for them in terms of management, administration, and so on.
3 minutes, John.
Yeah. Okay. So where and how are you going to present it? We started out locally. Over the COVID period, we ended up offering a national service for that particular project. Who will deliver it? Who are they? Have you got partners? Have you got partnership organizations who will help you, who will refer cases to you, and so on? And then the bigger one question, maybe you won't ask right to begin with, what form of organization, governance structures? Who are going to be your members? Will you have a steering committee? Will you have a board? Will you set yourself up as a charity, social enterprise? How will you set it up? Who's going to give leadership? How will you develop a strategy for building a community mediation? The more you can think about that and the feasibility of doing so in advance will save you a lot of heartache down the road, rather than just jumping in. However, there's nothing wrong with jumping in either if that's the only option open to you. How will you attract and keep volunteers? That's a really big question. And providing sharing and learning support, training opportunities, discounts, mentoring, peer support, all of that will be critical to maintaining volunteers who want to, usually they will be less experienced, who want to build, but you will also want to keep more experienced volunteers who will be able to provide the mentoring and the guidance. And finally, the big one that comes in very, very quickly is GDPR, policies, procedures, compliance, both with the 217 Act, with child and vulnerable adult protection, with CIM, child inclusive mediation, and all the kinds of things that you might be involved in now in mediating in the community and with families. So that's a real low-flying view and very, very quick. I've posed the questions anyway, whatever about the answers.
Well done, Sean. That's fantastic. I think that pretty distills it to a few pages, actually. And to be honest, it's quite intimidating for anybody that's starting off. They do need support, and they need everybody's support to get it going. And can I John, that was a brilliant presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you've done for me as well, for supporting me. And I'd like to go to Ronan now for a second, please, because Ronan's a solicitor in Wexford, originally from Clare, and he's thinking of starting off a community mediation service down in the Wexford area. Ronan, can I ask you first of all, do you feel intimidated by all those requirements? And do you feel you have the support for it, Ronan? And where are you thinking of going with this? And you're to blame for the nights thing, by the way, because it was you were asking me, where do I get the information? So thanks very much, Ronan.
And it's great to be here, and it's great to see so many people as well. There's a huge interest and passion, and amongst mediators and altruism. And I think if you can capture that, really, that's the essence of, I think, community mediation from the mediator point of view. But I've learned a lot there, so thanks for the talks, and also to Alison for hosting. Yeah, I definitely I think I have to be optimistic about it. I think I've just moved to this town. I moved to Enniscorthy recently, and I'm very interested in mediation. I qualified recently, and I'd like to set up a community mediation service. So what I've done so far is I put up posters and I advertised in the local paper. So I got to know the editor of the local paper, and he was very supportive. He advertised it for free. And I also went to a community centre, and I asked them, could they give me a room to do the community mediation? So they said they would charge like a minimal amount, and they were pretty good. But what I did was I gave a talk. What I was finding was that people don't know what mediation is. So that's the big problem. So I gave a talk in the community centre. They asked me to give a talk to the staff. And, and I just, went through mediation. I'm very passionate about it. And I encouraged them then to pass the word on and to replicate what it's about. And then I gave a subsequent talk in the local library as well. And that was very engaging, actually. And it was very inspiring in that sense, because people were, I could see that they got what it meant, and that there was a connection there, and so I could see that people were in distress as well through conflict, and that actually mediation, community mediation service, or any mediation service, could really help people and alleviate their suffering. So anyway, so I contacted the local TD. I won't say who it is now. It's a minister as well, but anyway, I was kind of half promised some funding, but I haven't seen it anyway. But and also I've been in touch with community leaders as well. So there's one particular community leader. She's involved with the Wexford Local Development Company, and she's been very, very good. So I think Jeffrey referred to outreach, and her role is like a liaison role with vulnerable people in the communities and say vulnerable groups. So I went around with her, really just meeting people, and that was very good as well to do that. And she's a great contact. And I joined other community groups where I started to meet other community groups or members, leaders, and kind of try and infiltrate their organizations, and spread the word as well. But I'll be honest with you, like, just because I wasn't working when I came here first, so, I had a lot of time, but I've had other commitments since then, so the wind has gone from the sails a little bit, but the passion is still there. That's the most important thing. And I think I'll take a lot from tonight. And also I've had other mediators contact me and say that they're very interested to volunteer as well. So I think it's like, there's a few points that come up inside me. Like, I think on the big picture with mediation, I think there's a need for a champion or somebody on a political level to actually, carry it forward and to bring it into budgets and, make it centralized in that way and make it on the agenda. I think that's very important, to find somebody who can do that and who's willing to do that. And then I'm aware there's other approaches with the restorative practices and private mediation as well. But you know, I'm not so, like John referred to the community development. I think that's very important as well, to try and ascertain what the community needs, what are the areas of trouble, antisocial behavior. I think that's very important as well, and that's something that I'll work on after tonight's talk. But I haven't had any clients so far, and I've advertised on Facebook as well. So I haven't gotten any funding. I contacted the council as well, and I asked them for funding for ideas anyway, and they didn't have any funding, but they referred me to a public participation network. I think there's one in each county, and they're like an umbrella organization for charities and for community groups, really. So they notify members of funding and training opportunities. So that's a good point for me now to go forward. And but I think there's a big picture here, and I think I think I need to get into more outreach as well. I need to contact people. I need to be able to get to that point where people are aware that there's a service, and they're aware that, you know, that it can help them, and not to be afraid as well, you know, so I need to do that more as well. So multifaceted, multi-pronged approach in many ways, and definitely, you know, so thanks, Tony. Cheers.
Yeah, well, Ronan, thanks. Look, you have great support here tonight. All around the screen, there are people that with great experience, and don't be afraid to reach out, Ronan. You know, as you said, everybody here probably takes an altruistic approach to it. There's nobody in community mediation for money. They're there because they believe in it, Ronan. So don't be afraid. Now, can I thank you very much, Ronan, by the way, and the very best of luck. I wonder, can I ask Alison? Alison, are you behind the MII thing in the corner? Thanks, Alison, for coming out in the corner.
Yeah.
Alison, just around questions, can you see the questions that are there, Alison?
Yeah. So I have one from Susan. Susan is our Equality and Diversity Liaison on Council, and she said, Ireland is becoming a diverse country with people from different countries and cultures. How can we promote equality, diversity and inclusion as mediators, and help people embrace the differences and create a stronger, productive society?
Okay, who would like to take that? Jeffrey?
Yeah, it probably Adrian, isn't it? I'm trying to find her name. O'Neill in our organization in MII, who's reached out to the Ukrainians and
Andre, yeah.
So she's probably the best one to give us some experience of that. But you're right that we may need to tailor some of our outreach to the needs of particular community groups, and now with the immigration issue becoming so populist, there certainly is a need for dialogue between immigrant groups or ethnic groups and local communities. So if you take something like Termon Feckin, not Termon Feckin, Newtown Mount Kennedy, I beg your pardon, where local people were concerned about the lack of consultation of an asylum house coming in. So again, there's this huge need for mediators or some kind of consensus building process between the local community and who might want to support this, but see their services being taken away from them or being impoverished by arrivals of new needs coming into the area. So
And I think Jeffrey, through the Irish Red Cross, there was a scheme that Andre supported, where a lot of the mediators in the Red Cross were trained, who went on and trained other people, and that's working at the moment. But there is a certain block around from government to acknowledge that mediation could help, and there could be a model of consultation devised to assist in these things. So I think that has been offered, but it hasn't been taken up, Jeffrey.
well,
Any other questions,
I
Alison?
understand that since Simon Harris has come in as Taoiseach, there are some pressures on the Department of Justice to come up with a better or the other or a cross-departmental approach,
Yes.
to introduce some better consultation process with local communities, so that there is an opening there for some of us who are ready to build that. I believe it needs a consensus building public multi-party approach.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. Alison?
Deirdre Joyce has a couple of questions. The first one is, there seems to be a push rather than a pull for community mediation. Is this the case?
John, can I go to you?
If by push you mean that community mediators see themselves as having a role of promoting mediation and understanding of mediation, then I would say yes, for sure. The pull is not directly in the form of an ask from communities. However, some of the approaches that we've taken more recently, where we work in partnership with organizations which already have a pull. So, for example, we worked with Tror on a recent project, and they were getting 2,000 calls per year from parents looking mostly for legal support, but as they talked it through with them, they realized actually it was help to communicate, make decisions, collaborate with each other as parents, rather than looking for just mediation. And what we found out there was that a lot of them weren't ready to go into mediation. So we did a lot of conflict coaching, for example, with them. So you may find that there is, Jeffrey called it there, a kind of a preparation for mediation or pre-mediation or caucus work that needs to be done to get people ready to begin to engage in some form of mediated dialogue or facilitated dialogue. So I think we have to be much more broad-minded as to what the community needs and begin to link up with organizations who already have a need that they're not able to fulfill, and begin to find ways or develop ways of collaborating with them. So for me, organization to organization is just as important as individual pull from the community.
Thanks, John, and thanks for the question, Deirdre. Alison, I know
Yes,
we're
so-
running over time, but if you have to go, then fine. But we'll continue for a while if you don't mind.
Sure. So Deirdre's next question was, is there an awareness at government or local authority or state level about the potential role of community mediation in resolving conflicts that they want to, or rather need to solve, such as getting local climate projects, cycle lanes, public projects, coastal defence, pedestrianisation programmes, and then the refugee centres and integration, etc. So is there an awareness at government or local authority or state level about the potential role of community mediation in resolving those issues?
Who'd like to?
I don't think so, and that's where there's a huge public relations effort. But maybe it's people like yourself, Deirdre, who have to go and create that field or create that opening to explain. So that you need to be ready with your PR or with your. But as we know, it's face-to-face work, It's about helping people to connect their need with mediation, and they don't. I don't think government departments know about it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey, and thanks, Deirdre.
Can I come in as well on that, Tony? My experience of that was working with economic consultants who were given the task of dealing with local issues that were that the government wanted solved, and they went to a different kind of organization, like the big consultancies or economic consultants or somebody else, so that you begin to, I know, part of the work that they have to produce could be done with the help of mediation skills and community mediation skills in particular. So I think looking at how you might collaborate with different kinds of organizations that we might see as just money makers, and they are money makers. And I think Enda Young, who is now taken over Mediation in Northern Ireland, is beginning to look more strongly in that direction these days, as well as obviously trying to do the piece of work that has given rise to such a strong mediation culture in the north of Ireland.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Deirdre. And I'm aware of a presentation made to a minister around local issues that were causing conflict for a community, where we felt that we could assist. We made presentations to that said minister, but never came back to us because it needed to be resolved very, very quickly. It was something that came up quickly and they wanted it to resolve quickly, but that's not how things work in a community. It just takes time. You must invest in the community, you must be in the community, and they must trust you. But, you know, there is a solution there, but sometimes they're not open to just investing, unfortunately. Alison?
Yeah, so Deirdre's other, well, the next one is, are there budget lines for conflict resolution in state bodies, agencies? If not, how could this be lobbied for? So I don't know if we'd have the answer to that question.
I don't actually. Listen.
Well, I can come in a little bit on that. So, for example, you've got the kind of public services mediation service. So a lot of organizations do have conflict management, and they would be linked into disciplinary process and stages in a disciplinary or grievance process. They would be built into that. So workplace mediation, I would imagine, does quite a lot of that, and it would be covered there rather than through community mediation.
Okay. Yeah. Can we take one more, Alison? Because I do want to keep people. I'm delighted that people turned up.
Yeah, Deirdre's other one is, there potential for mediation within organizations to facilitate getting projects over the line? And that's the last one.
Okay. Anyone would like to address that?
Yes, there is. Yes. Who's going to do it, though? It sounds like, from what John is saying, we all have to turn ourselves into consultants, capital C consultants, and put the big euro sign at the bottom of the page, and then they'll take note of us. But going along as volunteers, I don't think gets us in the door.
Okay. Okay, guys, listen, thanks everybody so much for turning up. I hope people got something out of tonight. And out of some of the topics that we've discussed this evening, we'll distill them down a little bit, and we might have another one of these webinars later on, maybe after the summer, specifically something around some of the topics that we discussed later on, or this evening. So thank you very much, everybody. There's another webinar around restorative practice. It's on in July the 18th. Dr. Ian Marder from Maynooth will talk about restorative practice and policing in Ireland. So if anybody is interested in that, please have a look at the MII website and register for it if you don't mind. I think it should be very, very interesting. And again, thank you so much to Alison, to Jeffrey, to John, to Ronan, and everybody else for turning up. If you have any questions, please email community@themii.ie, and I will guarantee you I'll personally get back to you. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Good night, and have a good summer, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Care.
Thank you.